Zuraida Dada, Ubuntu, I am because you are. This video is part of a conversation between Sandra Collins and Zuraida Dada. In this video, Sandra asked the following questions. What have you learned through Nelson Mandela's principle of Ubuntu? How can this principle inform an approach to psychological practice that is grounded in human rights?
I love this question, very powerful question. I'm going to start off by explaining what Ubuntu is and how Ubuntu came to be, because I think it's also interesting to know the history of Ubuntu, and then how we can incorporate that here in our daily work. So it goes back to Mandela and his fight for freedom. So Mandela was born in a very small little village in the Transkei, and they used to sit around the fire, and their elders would speak and narrate to them stories about the white men coming and those kind of things. And Mandela, his consciousness about freedom was actually born in those conversations. But it was all about freedom for the Xhosa-speaking people, which is his tribe that he belongs to. So for the longest time, Madiba was all about the Xhosa-speaking people. Like, we're fighting for freedom for them. It's just our little tribe. And when he came to Johannesburg, that is when his whole thinking started shifting. Because then he started noticing that the Indian people, for example, were doing a lot of silent protesting, according to Mahatma Gandhi's principles and teachings. So what they would do is they would stop working, for an hour, or they would, be involved in protests that were silent protests and just sit down and not say anything. So that was some of what he started learning. And what he started seeing was that, okay, we all have the same idea that we all want freedom, but it's not just my tribe that wants freedom. There are other people here who also want freedom, and they're doing it in different ways, right? And so that started spurring Mandela on to start looking at the fight for freedom as being bigger than just his tribe. His consciousness was awakened, and he started looking at the way in which different people were struggling against apartheid and the uprising that was happening in different areas and different ways. And so what he started doing was he started consolidating. Like, Mandela was very much a unifying figure for us in South Africa. I've been asked questions about, if Mandela wasn't there, do you think that you guys would have gotten freedom? And to be very, very honest, I don't think so, because I think Mandela was such a smart human being. Like, he was so intelligent. People don't recognize that, or that doesn't get enough attention, how strategic he was and how intelligent he was. But yes, he was a unifier, always was a unifier. So he started looking across the aisle, started looking at everybody else and started seeing, okay, so this is how we are doing it. And so he was the one who started intentionally, going across the aisle, if you like, and, speaking to people, Indians, and attending their meetings and, those kind of things. He started becoming more of a holistic thinker. And that's where Ubuntu was born, right? Because in the struggle, we all played a role in the struggle. So even though we look at Ubuntu as a concept of, reconciliation and post, trauma, but it was actually born under apartheid as a means to bring people together, as a means to have an ideal that we work towards. That's an ideal that we can all play a part in, and that's an ideal that we all strive towards. So that's what Mandela did, and that's where Ubuntu was born. If we bring it back to the counseling context, I think it's really important for us all to have the same vision of what we are talking about. Like Mandela, Mandela just used one word, freedom. That was it, freedom, right? And Amandla, which is strength, right? Amandla, and for the people, strength to the people. That was the slogan that Mandela used, right? And so that's I believe that it comes from that understanding of having a vision, in terms of where you want to be. What does freedom mean? What does freedom mean in general terms? And then how do we support one another to be able to get there? So that's the, the heart of Ubuntu. And Mandela, in his inauguration speech, he said something really powerful, which doesn't get mentioned too much. But Mandela thanked each and every one of us. He said, "I am your servant." He said, "The reason why I stand here is because of all the work that you have done in order to change this country." That was very, very powerful. And the reason why it's so powerful and why it is something that I think is timeless is because there's a truth in that. We all can come to this point of reconciliation if we all find our place in it and be able to give as much of ourselves as we can to this common goal of reconciliation, or this common goal of forgiveness, or whatever it is that we feel we are working towards. The other piece that I want to say is that one of the most traumatic things is when we don't recognize that racism exists, when we are in denial of the fact that racism exists. And secondly, when we are in denial of the fact that racism is traumatic. Basically, I think it's incumbent on all of us to understand, first of all, how we want to show up in this space, what we can contribute to this space to make Canada a more diverse and, a more healthier country. So I think it's important for us to recognize our role in that, and also to recognize that no matter what we do, we all are making a difference. It all coalesces at the end of the day. Mandela was just one person, but he managed to get 46 million people in the country to sing along the same lines, right? To be channeled in the same direction. We need strong, strong leadership, right? I do think that we need strong leadership, but we also need to be clear on what the end result is. We also have to understand our own limitations and what we can contribute to any of these changes, societal changes that we want to give effect to. And to recognize that sometimes, we may not be recognized individually for the work that we are doing, but the end result, if we get to the end result, that in and of itself is a recognition of the work that we've been doing.